Today we are going to be looking at congruent figures, and we're going to start with looking at what congruent polygons are. Congruent polygons have congruent corresponding parts. Which means that they have matching sides and angles. So let's take a look at example 1. If we have triangle ABC and triangle DEF, we know that they're congruent because they're showing us right here and telling us that they are congruent. So if we look, our first letters are A and D. That means that A and D are matching, so they're congruent. So angle A is congruent to angle D. B is next, as well as E. So B and E, they are matching, they are congruent, so angle B is congruent to angle E. And lastly, C and F are congruent, so angle C is congruent to angle F. So not only do we have to name the congruent angles, we have to name the congruent sides. So if we have side AC, side AC is congruent to DF, and it has to go in that order. A matches to D, C matches to F, so it's DF. Another side is CB. So we have side CB congruent to FE in that order. And then we have side BA, and BA is congruent to ED. Now if we look at triangle CAT, and it's congruent to angle DOG, we know C and D are congruent to each other, so angle C is congruent to angle D. A and O, so angle A is congruent to angle O. And T and G, angle T is congruent to angle G. So now let's find their sides. If we have side CA, CA is going to be congruent to DO. C matches with D, A matches with O. Now if we have side AT, that's congruent to OG. Then our last side is CT, and that's congruent to DG. Let's take a look at example 2. We need to now identify congruent figures. So we do not know if these are congruent yet, so we have to take a look. These two sides are congruent because they both have the same markings. These two sides are congruent, as well as these two sides. So that means that all three sides are congruent to in each triangle. Angles. Angle N matches angle B. They have the same marking. P and C are congruent. So are M and A. Since all three sides are congruent and all three angles are congruent in each triangle, then we know that this triangle is congruent. And since we know it's congruent, we can write our congruent statement. If I say triangle PNM, we would say that it's congruent to P matches C, so C, N matches B, M matches A. So triangle PNM is congruent to triangle CBA. Example 3, we are told that both of these triangles are congruent, so that means they have matching sides and angles, so we have to find the measure of the missing values. So if this angle is 90 degrees, F is 90 degrees. If this side is 4.5, D is 4.5 meters. We know this long side is 9.6 meters, so H is also 9.6 meters. E is 28 degrees, and G is 62 degrees. Let's flip over to the back side. Theorem 4.1 states that if two angles in a triangle are congruent to two angles in another triangle, then the third angles are congruent. So let's look at this theorem with an example and see how it actually works. So we're told that angle A and angle C are congruent. So angle A is congruent to angle C. And we're also told that the length of AD is 6 and the length of CD is also 6. So first, to determine if they are congruent, we have to make sure all three sides are congruent, which these sides are congruent, so are those. And since this one is shared, all three sides are congruent. We know that these two angles are congruent, as well as those two angles are congruent. So by theorem 4.1, since we know two angles in a triangle are congruent to two angles in another, the third angles are also congruent. So yes, these are congruent based on theorem 4.1, and all sides are congruent, as well as angles. Oops. All sides are congruent. So since we know our two triangles are congruent, we can write a congruent statement. So we can say triangle ABD. So our first triangle on our left is congruent to triangle A maps to C, so A is congruent to C, B is still congruent to B, and D is congruent to D. Alright, let's look at our last example for today. Let's add in one thing. We want to say that AB is parallel to DC. So if we add that in, AB is parallel to DC. We know that the length AD is congruent to BC. We know that angle A and angle C are congruent to each other. Since we know that these two lines are parallel, if we extend these just to give us a reminder of parallel lines and a transversal, here's our transversal, we end up with alternate interior angles. So if this is an alternate interior angle to here, we know based on the former lessons that alternate interior angles are equal to each other. They're congruent. So this side, this angle is congruent to this side, and this angle is congruent to that angle. So we know that all three sides are congruent, as well as all three angles. So yes, these are congruent because all three sides and angles are congruent. So if we need to write our congruent statement, we have triangle ABD is congruent to triangle A is congruent to C. B in this triangle is congruent to D in the next. D in their first triangle is congruent to B in our second. So triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CDB.